So it's not so easy to continue after Boris. Boris, I didn't know you are such a good performer. Thank you for interesting. But I will try. I will try 2 millenniums later than you started. So my main topic is post-war Western crisis management in Balkans from the Dayton Peace Agreement in 1995 until today, inspired by globalist agenda. Or how after the end of the Serbian war for Greater Serbia in Croatia and in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and after Dayton Peace Agreement, Western political actors tried to build geopolitical concept of the stable Balkans, and why did they fail to do so? To begin with, let me remind us how Margaret Thatcher saw the role of the state in the modern times in her book, Statecraft, Strategies for a Changing World, published in 2002. As I have a Croatian copy of book, Robin, you will excuse me if I will say something Margaret Thatcher did not wrote exactly like that. Okay. In my translation, the substance, the quote, substance of quote is, healthy and stable international order can only be based on respect for the nation and the national state. No matter how sometimes some nationalisms are flawed, national pride and national institutions are the best foundation for a functional democracy. Attempts to eliminate national differences, to combine different people with their distinctive traditions into artificial states will most likely fail, perhaps with bloodshed. End of the quote. The international managers of post-war settlement in the new states founded and internationally recognized after the breakup of former Yugoslavia did exactly the opposite. The concept of the international post-war stabilization in the Balkans was based on globalist agenda, which sees the future of the world without strong national states, with predominance of postmodern supranational mechanisms and with a free trade without boundaries. It was carried out by supranational organizations like EU, UN, OSCE, as well as by different international ad hoc bodies established to support post-war stabilization process, like Peace Implementation Conference or more known International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia. Actually, they followed the concept expressed by British diplomat Robert Cooper in his programmatical essay, The Postmodern State and the World Order. Sir Robert Cooper was a sort of foreign policy guru of the British Labour Minister, Prime Minister Tony Blair, and later on, he became the key person for creating the EU foreign policy, including the policy of post-war stabilization in Balkans. His concept was totally opposite to the conservative approach promoted and advocated by Thatcher. He was pledging for more international intervention, more NGOs, more human rights, more international justice. And of course, national states and national elites became the main enemy. In the mainstream public opinion, Cooper's approach was perceived as very progressive, and above all, very human rights oriented. And how does it look like behind? I will quote you a portion from his essay, Postmodern State. What are describing the methods of implementation his postmodern agenda, the humanist Robert Cooper wrote in his essay. But when we act against the old-fashioned types of states outside of postmodern Europe, we must return to the more brutal methods of earlier periods: force, preemptive strike, deception, whatever it takes for those who live in separate states of the 19th century. Between us, we abide by the law. But when we operate with the jungle, we must abide by the laws of the jungle. And they did so. Criticizing the new globalist agenda, Thatcher wrote, "I am extremely distrustful of some initiatives that are undertaken in the name of human rights and democracy. I do not consider them neither feasible nor legitimate." But at that time, she was out of the trend and out of the power. And Robert Cooper was very much in with the significant political power behind him. The power of PM Tony Blair, power of EU, power of USA, who advocated the globalist agenda very much. His concept became official international policy in the Balkans. And we have witnessed what it looks like when one tries to resolve and cure the conflict provoked by unresolved national issues and repression on national identity by denying national identity. Western stabilization policy included weakening of newly established national states, insisting on the new regional integration. They used to call it Western Balkans. Afterwards, they tried with the concept of Yugoslavia, which is more or less the same but less formal. And now the geopolitical concept is open Balkans. Open Balkans is now on the table. Along the way, old Yugoslav communist networks became natural allies of Western international political managers, more frequently through the newly established NGOs, and of course with substantial aid of George Soros and his open society agenda. I will present now just several significant examples of this process. After the Dayton Peace Agreement, Bosnia and Herzegovina was in the focus of the international efforts to keep the peace and to stabilize the country through the so-called nation-building process. But instead of providing the support to the building of institutions in a fragile and divided post-war country on the basis of the very imperfect Dayton Peace Agreement, which was extremely challenging job, they have the other idea, the idea of building new Bosnian nation. But there were already three existing nations: Bosniak, formerly Bosnian Muslims, Serbs, and Croats. Even Marshal Tito did not succeed under the circumstances of communism to build the new Bosnian nation. With such an approach, they only strengthened the hegemonic ambitions of the most numerous nations, the Bosnian Muslims in Bosnia. The war was finished under the lead of USA and Clinton administration in close cooperation with ground forces of Croatian army and the army of Croats from Bosnia and Herzegovina, HVO. But the international peace managers did not want to have the Serbian army clearly defeated. And they did not want to have the project of Greater Serbia, Miro mentioned, clearly defeated. So they stopped the Croatian armed forces in the autumn 1995 in the suburb of Bosnian-Serbian stronghold Banja Luka. Thatcher was strongly against it, and she expressed it clearly. They did it in order to prevent clear defeat of the Greater Serbia project, which was the main cause of the war. And moreover, in the peace accord, they preserved Republika Srpska, made up by ethnic cleansing and genocide, as one of the two entities in post-Dayton Bosnia and Herzegovina. In spite of that, Croats were the obvious winners in that war, but after the war ended, Western crisis managers made great efforts to weaken the new Croatian military and political leaders that emerged during the war. They support in both in Croatia and Bosnia and Herzegovina. In fact, in both Croatia and Bosnia and Herzegovina, in fact, the winners were sacked in peace in quite a brutal way. And they were replaced with former communist military officers and politicians, usually connected with communist secret police, because they were more cooperative and certainly less nationalist. And as communism failed, they declared themselves very human rights oriented. But at the bottom of their hearts, they have always remained anti-Western, especially anti-American and pro-Russian oriented. Republika Srpska was the special challenge. How to find the new leaders after all Serbian leadership? Karadzic, Krajišnik, and Plavšić were indicted by International Tribunal for War Crimes. How to find somebody who is not so much nationalist, who is ready to cooperate with Western agenda. And by the beginning of the new century, they were very proud because they found a perfect guy, a genuine new leader. He did not participate directly in the war crimes. He was not so nationalist. On the eve of the war, he joined the party of Yugoslav reformists led by former last prime minister of former Yugoslavia, Ante Marković, and under supervision of JNA. This party was under supervision of JNA and its intelligence service called KOS. The name of this perfect guy was, Milorad Dodik. So for those who do not know, Milorad Dodik today is known as a major threat to stability in Bosnia and Herzegovina and wider region, the most anti-Western leader in BiH and the most loyal ally of Russian President Vladimir Putin in this part of the Europe. And he was the clear choice of the Western policymakers 20 years ago. One of the most powerful tools in promoting the globalist agenda in the process of post-war stabilization in the Balkans was the International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia, based in The Hague. It would be a very long story to describe the hypocrisy, distortions, arrogance, and substantial injustice they have made in their basically politically wishful approach to the prosecution of the war crimes on the territory of former Yugoslavia. Instead, if it will work, I will show you just two videos, very short videos, 10 seconds each. Može onaj u Vukovaru? Yeah. So you could see a bit of justice the International Criminal Tribunal brought to Croatia. They are very short, just 10 to 15 seconds each. Just to remind you to the picture, one is the picture of Vukovar in the November 91st, after the city was conquered and occupied by Yugoslav army and Serbian forces. It's really short, and it's really just to remind you that's Vukovar one day after the city was occupied. Look at the ruins. I mean, that's and the next one is Knin. It was the center of Serbian rebellion, occupied for 4 years, and the video was shot the day after Croatian army liberated it in the August 1995. And look at the streets and the houses, how in damage they were. So, why? Yes, that's it. Just to remind you. So, I decided to show you those two pictures. Just to present you what Carla Del Ponte, the former chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Tribunal, did. She issued the indictment against the commanders of Croatian military operation Storm, led by General Gotovina. In fact, the operation which liberated Croatian territories occupied for 4 years and which made Dayton Peace Agreement possible for international chief prosecutor was planned and organized criminal enterprise with the goal of ethnic cleansing. In the core of the indictment was the charge of excessive shelling of Knin. And as you could see in the, in the video, what the evidences prosecutor had, what happened, in Knin, after the one-day shelling, some windows were broken. There were some traces on the houses, on the roofs, and that's it. And even international prosecutor couldn't find more than just one possibly civilian person who was the victim of the shelling in Knin, of this excessive shelling. And the same prosecutor did not notice the operation Vukovar, led by JNA and Serbian forces, and there was no charges and no indictment for excessive shelling of Vukovar, which lasted for 3 months, and at the end, city was literally razed to the ground. So that's just a little picture or the mirror of the justice the International Tribunal brought. But there were also quite a lot of good things that the tribunal did. For example, the inside witnesses described clearly before the tribunal the key role of GNA intelligence service, also known as COS, which is similar to GRU in Russian army, in the massive crimes against war prisoners in Croatia and in Bosnia and Herzegovina. But the commanders and the officers of COS became already the key witnesses and advisors of the international prosecutors. The inside witnesses described how COS organized, their agent, their former agents, how COS organized the sustainable network of their agents of influence and collaborators in each of the new states on the territory of former Yugoslavia, even before the war started. But those networks have already cooperated closely with international crisis managers, envoys, and representatives. Preoccupied with his own agenda, the international bureaucracy failed to recognize in the Balkans the developments which became global threats several years later. For example, they completely ignored Al-Qaeda activities in Bosnia during the war in the 90s. They woke up on September 11. They have ignored for a long time spreading of Russian influence all over the region in close alliance with Serbian policy of Serbian world. Thanks to its gas, strategic investments, corruption, and old connections from communist era, Russia became extremely influential not only in non-integrated countries in Balkans, which are not members of EU or NATO, but also in fully integrated Croatia and Slovenia. Western bureaucracies woke up for a moment in 2016 when Russian and Serbian agents attempted to carry out a coup in Montenegro in order to prevent the country from becoming a NATO member. Montenegro became a NATO member, but Serbia continued to destabilize the country through its proxy political parties and Serbian Orthodox Church. New Western answer to joint Serbian and Russian attempts to spread their influence and destabilize Montenegro and the wider region is the concept of open Balkans. And once again, the concept of open Balkan is not the solution for overcoming instability and potential chaos. Open Balkan means just to open the door to Serbian and potentially Albanian hegemonic ambitions on a regional level, and also to open the region towards the toxic influence of Putin's Russia and Erdogan's Turkey. It is almost an open invitation to Serbia to continue with the hegemonic policy of Serbian world towards all its neighbors, especially towards Montenegro and BiH. Western supranational bureaucracy hopes Serbia will be grateful for this opportunity. They will turn their back to Russia. They are wrong one more time. No lesson has been learned in the last 3 decades. In fact, I think they even do not believe they should learn any lesson. They have produced a lot of reports, enough of useless papers. So their job is well done. Thank you for your attention.